2023 has been a relatively great year for the UFC, and I've been thinking, after watching Alex Pereira become champion, watching Bo Nickal do his thing, watching Tom Aspinall become champion, I've been really thinking, like, you have so many guys who've only been signed recently. You have Khamzat Chimaev as well. How long ago were these guys signed? You'll see that most of it was around 2020, around late 2019, early 2020, some of them afterwards. And it got me thinking that, wow, the UFC, a lot of their best guys that are coming up were signed in the past 3 years. So it gave me the idea that, why don't I go through and look at who were the best signings? And there's not really a conductive, like a pure, a way to really determine who is the best signing. Some people say the best champion, or the guy who became a champion, the guy who's on a winning streak, the guy who brings in the most money. It's kind of vague. I'm just kind of looking at maybe a combination of everything, also put in their potential for what they can do, what they've already done, what their future is, and stuff like that. So, yeah, and by the way, sorry if you hear the fan playing in the background. I hope it's not too loud, but now that we've got that out of the way, just some quick honorable mentions. Paddy Pimblett, Matsui Gamrot, and Manil Cap. So Pimblett is 4-0 in the UFC. He's a former Cage Warriors featherweight champion, and he's just not on simply because I just don't see him ever becoming champion. So I think he's a really good signing because he's a star, and he's always fun to watch. Well, it's not fair to say that his fight against his previous fight was pretty boring as well. So against Jared Gordon, so that might not be the most fair thing to say, but he does have a fight coming up with Tony Ferguson, but I just don't see him ever reaching that pinnacle, but he's still a good signing. Gamrot, 6-2. His best wins are over Surukin and Turner, Jalen Turner, and I don't know, man, he's just, right, he's kind of boring, maybe some people will say. I don't know if that's the best way to describe him. I'm surprised that a lot of people online aren't that big of fans of him, but I think he's all right, you know. Do I think he'll be champion? Maybe not. He just got a win over Fiziev, which was controversial because he was celebrating when Fiziev hurt himself. But I don't think he was doing that out of... maybe he just thought that, hey, I injured the guy, which is why I won. So people, I think, were being a bit too harsh on him. But I think he's a good fighter either way, and he has potential as well. Then you have Manil Cap, who's a former Ryzen bantamweight champion, 4-2 in the UFC. It's still to be seen how far his upper limits are, right? He lost to Alexander Pantoja, I believe, in his debut, which, now that we're looking at it, I love Pantoja. He's probably my favorite fighter in flyweight, and we've seen that Pantoja's champion, right? It's not a bad loss at all. In fact, he had a recent winning as well, and it looks like his fight with Kai Kara France needs to be booked. I know they've been booking that, or trying to, for a while, and there's been problems back and forth, so he's up there, definitely. He might be like number 11 right on the dot, but we got to see what his upper limits are right now, and we'll find out once he fights that high level competition like Kai Kara France. So now that we got that out of the way, number 10 is Shara Magomedov. We have to place a Dagestani, right? There's Umar Nurmagomedov as well, but he had a fight with Corey Sandhagen that was booked, but he pulled out, so he doesn't really have that win that would really cement him. The reason why I'm going with Sharaputin Magomedov as a Dagestani over Umar is he's just the most fun Dagestani fighter since the beat. And when it comes to Dagestani fighters, a lot of people are like, well, you know, they're very wrestling heavy, not the most fun to watch. And then you have this guy show up who's very fun to watch, who is a signing that proves that, hey, there are Dagestani guys out there, guys in the Caucasus Mountain that are actually fun to watch. He came in with an insane amount of hype, like videos on him on YouTube are doing 1 million views. You had Joe Rogan talking about him, and he arguably could have debuted on the main card of UFC 294. I know there was like maybe a women's fight that you could have argued that Sharaputin should have been on the card instead of that. He had a good fight with Bruno Silva, which is currently his only UFC fight, so I can't put him higher because, again, Bruno Silva, that's just it. But Bruno Silva is, you know, one of the better unranked guys, and he did show weaknesses in the takedown defense, but he did outland him even while on his back, so he got taken down several times in the fight, but he was outlanding. He was throwing, like, kicks, and he was throwing elbows, like, just active on his back, and when the fight was on the feet, he even rocked him with the head kick. So he's really fun to watch, very flashy, the type of fighter that fans will enjoy. Do I think he's as fun as the beat? That will be something we have to watch out for. You know, keep watching and see how it goes. The difference with Zabit was that his takedowns, like he was just excellent everywhere, maybe except the cardio. It seems like Shara Putin's one problem was his cardio as well. But Zabit didn't really get taken down. He was doing the taking down instead. So it'll be interesting to see how he deals with that. But overall, I think in the past 3 years, he is the best Dagestani guy to be signed to the UFC. Number 9, I'm going Ian Garry. So let's be honest, majority of people don't like him. I don't know if it has to do with the Neil Magny stuff. I don't think it was that terrible, but the more, people are finding out about his wife and just her insanity, and then there's the stuff going on right now as I'm making this video about him and Leon Edwards and getting kicked out of the gym. Say what you want, right? He's maybe personality-wise, he's not the best guy, but he is an Irish star, and it seems like the UFC really wants to push him, and he's become really popular in a short amount of time. He's 6-0 in the UFC, and he has an undefeated record of 13-0. He does have a shot at becoming champion. I'm not going to say that he can't do it. He's looked very impressive in every fight he's had so far. He did get almost KO'd by Song Kenan, who's unranked, but he made a great comeback, right? Like, he showed that heart. He showed his ability to take damage and come back, which is always really good to see in prospects and kind of see how do they deal with adversity, when they get knocked down, how do they come back and stuff like that. So he proved it in that fight. And I put him at number 9, and I put him above like Paddy Pimblett because I just think he has more potential to become a champion than Pimblett. And if you become a champion, you draw money. So I think in the long run, Ian Garry does have, even though he's unlikable, he does have the ability to become champion. He's talented enough. And his current wins are against Daniel Rodriguez and Neil Magny on short notice, which, isn't the best look, like Daniel Rodriguez and especially Neil Magny on short notice. But he has a fight coming up against Vicente Luque at UFC 296, which is going to be, I can't wait to watch that. I'm pulling for Luque, but if Garry gets that win, you can't deny him anymore. Number 8, I'm going to go with Bo Nickal. So the reason why I'm going with the unranked prospect, Bo Nickal, is because when a company like the UFC signs a high-level athlete, it always looks good, right? Because Bo Nickal is a high-level wrestler, an NCAA, multiple NCAA champion. And it makes the UFC really seem like they're the place to be when you have guys of this caliber going there and signing with them. And he has a huge wrestling fan base, right? A lot of people who maybe don't even watch the UFC but know Bo Nickal, follow him from his wrestling, collegiate wrestling days. They're going to tune into the UFC as well. So he's bringing in a bunch of viewers who just want to see him. There's also that intrigue, right? Because when you have like a high-level wrestler, a high-level grappler, the question always is they're so dominant. Can they be beaten? It's very different than a kickboxer, which is like just take him down. But with Bo Nickal, it's more so like how do you deal with it? Because he's shown that he has incredible striking as well, which I'm going to get into. But let's talk about like how does he do against Khamzat Chimaev, right? I know he's talked about that fight. He said that he would smoke him, I think. And some people are like that. There's no way that would happen. But there's the intrigue anyways. He's currently 4-0 in the UFC. 2 of those were the Dana White Contender Series, and then 2 of those were outside of that in the UFC. He's yet to beat an unranked. I wrote has yet to beat an unranked fighter. What I mean is he has yet to beat a ranked fighter, right? So that's one thing kind of look out for. Is he all hype? So we don't really know thus far, but he is a lot of hype, right? In the 4 fights he's had, especially his recent one, a lot of people really want to see him because we know wrestling is such an important base, but he's got striking, right? He's knocking guys down. His last fight was a finish that you can see in the GIF here, right? He didn't even shoot a takedown. He had no need to. And if it keeps going like this, he'll definitely become a champion, right? Heavy hands, good striking, phenomenal wrestling, great submission as well. I mean, the sky's the limit for Bo Nickal. So I think in the long term, in the short term, maybe some people will be like, why is he number 8? Above Ian Garry and all these guys, but he's an NCAA champion who's bringing in the hype, who I think has a higher chance of becoming a champion than Garry or maybe even Shara Putin and Paddy Pimblett and all those guys as well. Going on to number 7, Dricus du Plessis. He'll be fighting for the middleweight championship at UFC 297 in January, and he currently has a 6-fight win streak, which is the longest win streak in the middleweight division. He also holds the win over Robert Whittaker. I think he's the first fighter, aside from Adesanya, in like years and years to actually beat Whittaker, right? Whittaker he's got wins over Gastelum and Cannonier and Romero twice. and it took Dricus du Plessis to finish him. He's a great grappler, solid power, right? He showed that with the way he took Whitaker down, how he KO'd him, TKO'd him. He's a smart guy as well, because when he had Whitaker hurt, he wasn't just head hunting. He was also going to the body, head, right? Taking him down, huge elbows. Superstar potential, good looks, well-spoken, and he has a fan-friendly fighting style, right? Like his fight, I can't remember his name, but he had a couple of fights before as well that they're just wars. Like you really want to watch this guy and see what he can do. And his feud with Adesanya, man, like he ended up making Adesanya look terrible. You know, when Adesanya came into the ring, came to the octagon and trash talked him, it's like it made Dricus look that much more likable, and it made Adesanya like that may be the beginning of the end, like where Adesanya, I think people already were kind of sick of him. Then Pereira showed up and people just fell for Pereira. But the real, I think, nail in the coffin for Adesanya was just making an absolute fool of himself with this whole Dricus du Plessis thing. So in the long run, again, good-looking guy, well-spoken, great fighting style, fighting for the title. He's actually one of the guys who's fighting for the belt next. Has a really good chance of winning it against Strickland, I think. Already has a big marquee rivalry with Adesanya. I think long-term, Dricus du Plessis is he's great. For the UFC, he's great, and he was a wonderful signing. I believe they signed him 2021. I could be wrong, maybe 2020. I think it was 2020, but great signing overall. Number 6, Tom Aspinall. So Tom Aspinall, I know he was signed late 2019, but he made his debut in 2020, so I'm going to count it anyways. First UK heavyweight champion. Interim, but still. 7-1 in the UFC. His loss to Blades was an injury. Doesn't really count, right? I think he came in with the injury and he just stepped on it weirdly. Doesn't really count at the end of the day. He's a new breed of heavyweights. He moves like a lightweight. You look at his footwork, his hand speed. There's nobody really like him. You see what he did to Sergey Pavlovich, right? Because Pavlovich is so used to fighting flat-footed Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa, Curtis Blades, these guys who are just slow. Their hand speed is slow. Their footwork is slow. And then you have a guy like Tom Aspinall who fights literally like a lightweight, the way he moves. He KO'd Sergey Pavlovich, scariest man in the UFC, like purely speaking, just the scariest man because he is a heavyweight, right? He's 260 pounds, just a scary man. And he knocked him out. He traded hands with him, didn't shoot a takedown, beat him in the boxing. He can arguably beat Jones at heavyweight. I think if him and Jones were to fight, I would go with Aspinall. I think Aspinall beats him. He's stronger. He's faster on his feet. He's faster in striking, and he's got great grappling offense. Defense is good as well. Overall, just really, really good fighter, and especially for the heavyweights. He makes all the other heavyweights kind of look like bums, right? It's just him. Pavlovich is up there as well. A couple of other guys like Gane, but I don't think Gane, even in striking, is on the level Aspinall is. One thing to note, though, is that he is a bit soft-spoken, and when it comes to becoming a major star, the reason why I don't put him a bit higher is I really do think that his star potential will always be lower than the guys who are willing to go the extra mile and trash talk and have, even if they don't trash talk a lot, but they just have that personality, that wild charisma like Khamzat Chimaev. With Aspinall, it's much more calm, English style, right? And I think that even if he goes on like a tear, and I think he could beat Stipe Miocic's title defense, four title defense record or whatever it is. I think Aspinall could overcome it. But even then, I see him having a struggle with really getting to superstar potential because of just how nice and how relaxed and calm he is when he speaks. But he's still a star, still one of the best heavyweights in the world. Best heavyweight. I mean, he's a champion. He deserves it. He's the actual champion. Let's call him that. It's not Jones. It's Aspinall. Overall, a fantastic signing for the UFC. Number 5 is Michael Chandler. Now, in another time, if this had happened, if he had maybe gotten the fight with McGregor, he'd probably be maybe number 3 or even 2. But well, I'll just go into it first. He's provided one highlight after another after being signed, right? He gets signed to fight Dan Hooker on the same card as McGregor and Chandler. I mean, McGregor Poirier too, who he's fought Poirier and should maybe, who knows, going to fight McGregor. Got that huge KO win. then fought Oliveira, and since then he's just had like continuous highlight performances. He's 2-3 in the UFC, 2 performance of the nights and 2 fights of the night performances. His fight against Gaethje was just insanity, and his knockout over Tony Ferguson was exquisite. It's been an insane ride from Michael Chandler, who's fought a murderer's row since arrived in the UFC. Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier, right? He's just been fighting the top of the top, even though he has said that he won't fight Dariush, or I think it was Sarukian actually, which to me is also another reason why I won't put him higher. When you're a guy who's signed to fight the best in the world and you're told like, hey, why don't you fight Sarukian? He's one of the best, and you're like, well, I don't see why I should fight him. Instead, I'll fight McGregor, which, okay, that's fine. Like, you want to make money, but he's one of those guys, kind of like Poirier. Poirier can turn down fights because, now, I still hate it when he does it. He also turned down a fight, I think, with Sarukian and Dariush. Now, it's just stupid, it's dumb, and it's a terrible look for any fighter that does that. But with Poirier, you could argue that he's fought since so long in the UFC, and he's fought everybody the UFC has put into him and put in front of him, and now he really wants just those big money fights. So, okay, fine. But Chandler doesn't really have an excuse to be turning down fights like that. And he's been out since November 2022. Like, I can't put this guy higher if he's just not fighting. I get it. He's chasing the McGregor fight, but he's not like Jiri, who was injured. He's ready to go. He's 37 years old, and he's going to be 38 next year, and he's spending this time because we know that in light heavyweight, you can get away with being a bit older, right? You can, like, Pereira's 36, turning 37 next year. You have Glover Teixeira, who became champion, I think, at 40. Jan's 40 right now and is like number 2 or 3 in the rankings, maybe number 4. Lightweight, featherweight, all these bantamweight, in these divisions, the older you get, it just seems to be a bit more difficult to keep up, and he's already 37, and he's going to be 38 next year. He's probably not making a championship run at this point in his career. We shouldn't expect him, really. I'd be surprised to see him fight for a title again, unless if it's a short like a step in, like a replacement, kind of like what Volkanovski did. I really don't see him fighting for the title again. And it seems like his career trajectory at this point is just fight McGregor if he could, which the earliest it could happen right now is UFC 300 in April. So, excuse me, that's the earliest, absolute earliest this fight could happen, and it hasn't even been booked yet. It could happen even in like August or June or July. Like, he's hasn't fought at all 2023 and might fight once, if that, at 2024. So I think that because of that decision he's made, which money-wise, maybe it was the best decision because it's Conor McGregor, but because of that, I just don't see him being as high marquee of a signee as he was a couple of years ago. He's kind of become irrelevant, right? In this sport, if you're taking a year off like this, and he's not even a trash talker, where his stuff with McGregor is so fun to watch, and his Ultimate Fighter, he's that motivational talker type of a guy, so I can't put him any higher than number 5. Number 4 is Shavkat Rakhmonov, who is the boogeyman of 170, the welterweight division. He's one of the handful of fighters from Kazakhstan currently in the UFC. He's undefeated in the UFC, 5 wins, all of them by finish. I think he's 16-17 endo, all of them again by finishes. And in the UFC, his notable wins are Neil Magny and Jeff Neal. Neil Magny, of course, not the most impressive win, but it wasn't short notice like Ian Garry's. It was full camp. And Jeff Neal is a really impressive win. Like, Jeff Neal is real good. If you guys saw what he did to Vicente Luque, this guy's no slouch, especially on the feet with the boxing he has. He's real good. And Shavkat stood with him and traded with him and beat him. Eventually, he did get the submission, of course. But we're just talking about when they're fighting in the boxing range, in the kickboxing, Shavkat still looked good. He got caught a lot, but he has a great chin. He has a great ability to move with the shots, and he has great footwork as well. That's one thing about Shavkat I really like. Very fun fight style. It's very fan-friendly, and he has a huge fan base despite the fact he doesn't speak English. Part of that might just be Kazakhstani fans. Part of that might just be fans of fighters from that area in the mountains. Either way, I'm a fan of him because he's just so fun to watch, and he's undefeated, and he's one of those undefeated guys who's you know that he's not undefeated because he's fighting bums. He's actually fighting tough guys, and he's going to be fighting Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, the best striker arguably in the UFC, 296, or best MMA striker, right? He's very likely to be a future champion of welterweight. Out of all these guys on this list who aren't champions thus far, I do think Shavkat is probably the most likely to become a champion. Sky's the limit for him. Again, not the most. He can't really speak English, and that usually is like a problem for a guy trying to be a star into a superstar. But with a guy like Shavkat, who already has such a huge fan base, and he has that fan-friendly style, and he's so popular with his country people. I mean, and he's so talented. He's going to be champion. I really do believe that. So sky's the limit for him. A great signing by the UFC. Let's try to go through this. I don't want this to take too long. Number 3, Khamzat Chimaev. Absolute fireworks since his debut. He's undefeated, 7-0 in the UFC with 5 of those by finish. He holds notable wins over Kamaru Usman, Kevin Holland, and Gilbert Burns. He's a massive star. He's near superstar status. You can claim he's already a superstar. If I could rewrite this, I would probably put superstar. I think he has like 8 million followers on Instagram, or like 7 million. So much hype whenever he fights. Great fight style. He's really wrestling dominant, which wrestlers tend to have an image of being kind of boring to watch. But Khamzat Chimaev is so fun, like the way he dominates guys and gets them to the ground. But all that said, right, like so much hype. The wins, Kamaru Usman, Kevin Holland, Gilbert Burns, all these things that he's been doing. But that doesn't paint the full picture, because his career has been kind of confusing. I can't put him at number 1 when his career has been basically where he's, he fights Gilbert Burns, he's fighting Kamaru Usman, he's fighting these guys, and his aura of invincibility is kind of disappearing, right? Against Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman didn't even get the time to really bulk into 185. He just had to lose the fat he already had on him. And it was arguably a draw. And Chimaev had 1 year off, 1 year to improve, came in fully bulked for 185. Dominant first round, but couldn't get the win. And again, I think he won, but a lot of people thought it was a draw. Then he had his fight with Burns, where people were again arguing that he lost to Burns because it was such a close fight. And Burns was a former 155er, right? So his career has been kind of confusing in that way. He was next for the title shot at welterweight, but had a fight with Nate Diaz. Easiest fight for him. No, would have finished it probably in the first round, and he can't make weight. And that's one of the weird things about his career. It's right. It's just kind of excuses. Well, I would have made weight for Nate Diaz, but my doctor said not to. I would have beaten Kamaru Usman, but I injured my hand. Gilbert Burns, I don't have that much experience. It's always been kind of just these excuses with him. Then he disappears for a year while waiting to go up to 185. He needs to be more active. If I want to put him higher on this list, he has to be more active. It's unacceptable to be out for more than a year if you're not injured. Just unacceptable. And he just needs more experience, right? He's 13-0. I know the UFC really wants to give him a title shot, and I'm just saying, don't give him a title shot yet. Let him work himself up a bit, right? We've seen his kind of invincibility kind of drop in a way, and people are like, he's a one-round machine, but after that he slows down. Let's see him a bit more. Put him in there with Adesanya, maybe Whitaker. Let's see how he does against those guys before you throw him into the title ship, because if you want him to be a title, you want him to be a champion, and you want him to be a champion for a long time because he brings in money, then it's better to have him be as good as possible once he gets to that level, because right now it seems like there's so much more for him to grow, and he's just not active enough to continue that experience. Because of that, over him, I'm going to put number 2 is Jiri Prochazka. Jiri's a fantastic ambassador for the sport. Let's just be honest. That's a reason why I put him up here. He's the perfect embodiment of martial arts. He makes the UFC look good. You know, in the world of UFC, where you have the trash talkers, and then you have like boring fighters who don't trash talk. You have Jiri Prochazka, who doesn't need to be either. He doesn't trash talk, but he's not boring either. He's a great ambassador for the entire sport of MMA. And his samurai-esque influence, his martial arts love, all of that thing has made him such a fun guy to watch. Great personality as well. He's 3-1 in the UFC, 2 Fight of the Nights and 2 Performance of the Night bonuses, right? Which is pretty crazy. This guy's only had 4 fights and he's had 4 bonuses. Basically, he gets a bonus every time he fights. And he had one of the greatest fights of all time against Glover Teixeira. Became a champion in just his 3rd fight. So first fight, Oezdemir. Second fight, Dominic Reyes. 3rd fight, Glover Teixeira. This guy does not take easy fights, because his 4th fight was Alex Pereira. He spent a year off due to an injury. So you can forgive him, obviously, for not being active during that time. If he was active during that time, I probably would put him number 1, in all honesty. He's so good, so fun to watch, right? He's a big problem for the entire light heavyweight division, even though he lost to Pereira coming off of an injury for a year, and he had some good moments against Pereira as well, keep that in mind. But one of the things that I like about Jiri so much, he's young, he has time to grow, and not only that, but just that personality of his, it's so different than what anybody else is doing in the UFC. It's like, how do we get a guy who's makes our sport look better, right? To people who have this preconceived notion about what MMA is. You have a guy like Jiri, who's the calm, stoic, the samurai-esque style of a fighter, and he makes the sport just seem so much more like, oh, it's not just a bunch of meatheads punching each other in the head. There's an actual sort of, like, maybe say a spirit to it, as Jiri would say, right? The power and all that, what he loves to say. And I do see him becoming a light heavyweight champion again. He's going to get back there, trust me. He's like, what, 31, 32? I mean, come on. And number one, should have seen this coming. Let's be honest. My favorite fighter, probably your favorite fighter, who doesn't love him? It's Alex Pereira. Well, if you're an Izzy fan, you might not like him, but I know there are Izzy fans who like him as well. In his 7th fight, he captured his 2nd title in a different weight class, right? He came in, glory kickboxing champion, comes into the UFC, and is now a 2-division UFC champion, not at the same time, but he's overall a 2-division champion, which is insanity. He holds wins over 4 former champions in just 7 fights. That is, I really want you to put that into perspective. Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland, Jan Blachowicz, Jiri Prochazka, 4 former champions he has wins over. He's 6-1 in the UFC, 11 fights overall. Chimaev has 13-0. I said Chimaev needs more experience, and you have Pereira over here with 11 fights, and he's already double champion, which puts into perspective just how special of a fighter this man is. He single-handedly made the middleweight division interesting again, right? So he comes, knocks out Sean Strickland, beats Adesanya. Suddenly, the mystique, the invincibility aura of Adesanya is gone. Like, he lost to Jan Blachowicz, but Jan's so much bigger, and he's a light heavyweight. Robert Whittaker arguably beat him in their fight, but it was such an uninteresting, boring, just uneventful fight. This was the first fight where Pereira kind of showed some of the weaknesses of Adesanya that I think Strickland took advantage of in his fight. Every fight is must-see when you have a guy with as much power as Alex Pereira. You want to watch him anytime he fights. His power is crazy. His leg kicks, man, the way he doesn't even... You don't see him coming. They're completely non-choreographed, right? Or telegraphed, rather. And 4 performance of the nights in 7 fights. Imagine that. And even if you look at his career, like, people are going to say he's been hand-picked fights and stuff like that. I mean, come on. The guy he came into the UFC. What is it? If he had 7 fights in the UFC and he has 11 overall, he was 4 fights into his career when he came into the UFC. The guy was a kickboxer. His last fight was in kickboxing, or no, actually I think it was MMA. But the guy basically has like 0 grappling. It's not his fault Sean Strickland doesn't grapple with him. It's not his fault Bruno Silva can't keep him down. It's not his fault that his first opponent, whose name I can't remember, can't keep him down. He gets taken down. Guys are taking him down, and they can't hold him down. Jan takes him down. Jan was his biggest test. I consider that to be the best win of Alex Pereira's career. Jan couldn't keep him down for too long, right? Because Pereira still won that fight. He did get taken down, don't get me wrong, but he also stuffed takedowns as well. Very impressive. He stuffed almost all of Adesanya's takedowns in their fight, and Adesanya had to reverse Pereira's own takedown to get him down. So I think the idea that, Pereira's just a guy you shoot a takedown on and you'll get him down, I think he's proven that's not the case anymore. Jiri did, and he got back up, right? And he was so good because Jiri's ground and pound is so good. It's an underrated part of his game, and Pereira completely nullified it. So I don't want to hear it anymore. This guy is a really high-level MMA fighter, not just kickboxer anymore. And he's just improving. He's 36, and he's turning 37 next year, and he's staying active, right? He's fighting. He fought 3 times in 2023, and he got knocked out, and he came back 3 months later to beat Jan Blachowicz in a different weight class. Absolute insanity. He looked less bloated too when he fought Jiri, so it seemed like he kind of made that quick turnaround. With Jan, didn't even come into the light heavyweight division with his full physique the way he should. But either way, man, this guy, so fun to watch. His demeanor, his entrance, the way he comes in, like the fans in his fight with Jiri at 295, everybody was like yelling with him when he did the bow and arrow thing. Just such a fun guy to watch. His personality, his rivalry with Adesanya, crazy to think this guy's first fight was in, I think, 2021. It was a Colby Covington Kamaru Usman card. So in just a short amount of time, he's coming and he just put everybody on notice. Just you can't help but love Alex Pereira, right? And his story as well. Everybody knows the story. Don't need to go too much into that, but hopefully he continues to stay active and gets that fight with Jamal Hill early, maybe March or April. Probably not March. They already got a fight booked, but if UFC 300, if not that, then May at the very least. I want to just be active, and I want to keep seeing Pereira fight. He is the best signing the UFC has made in the past 3 years. Above Chimaev, above Jiri, above Tom Aspinall. I think he's been the best. 3 main events. I want you guys to keep that in mind. 7 fights, 3 main events. I think he's generated more than 1.5, maybe million pay-per-view buys in those 3 fights. We don't know for sure, but I'm just going to assume that. Incredible for the fans, incredible for the UFC. So lucky to get to watch him. I kind of wish he maybe came in a bit earlier as well, but things happen as they do, and maybe it was the best time for him to come when he did. So Alex Pereira, number 1. That's what I'm going to go with. So tell me what you guys thought. Did you agree, disagree? Do you think somebody should be on this list who I completely forgot? Would you switch it around? What do you guys think? Let me know all of that in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.